And every time I've gone to London, I've had like really intense experiences. And I don't know if I've talked about this on the show before, but it was about Mercury Retrograde. I'm sorry, not Mercury Retrograde. It was about astrocartography. And I was part of a group, and we were traveling to Findhorn. And we had a day layover in London, basically. We got into London early in the morning, and then we were driving. We were on the train to Findhorn later that night. I mean, about like 10 o'clock, 10:30 that night. It was very, very intense day. Sleep deprivation, and a whole day in London. You know, they've got this major construction going on outside of the studio here. It's kind of bothersome. Wonder if I could get them to stop. Doubtful, huh? Maybe they could take an early lunch break. I don't think it's going to happen. Anyway, so I'm with this group of people, and I'm trying to figure out what to do in London for a day. Sleep deprived. I've never been to London before. My first time, and it was overwhelming, man. I mean, the first time in London was almost like the first time I went to New York. Just overwhelming. Sensory overload. The speed of the traffic, everything was just like in my face. And this was in 1984. And at that time, the movie 1984 with John Hurt was at theaters all over London. So George Orwell's 1984. I was the class of 1984 in college. That was my class. Fitting in an odd way. So we're cruising around London, and I eventually happened upon this church, and it's kind of like this New Age church in London. And I saw that night there was what I thought was like a workshop or something, right? Like they were having a talk or a seminar or something that was free. We had all this time to call, and I'm like, wow, you know, let's check this out. Now, this is, again, we're on the cusp of, I think it was, we're on the cusp of Libra and the Scorpio. It's just becoming Scorpio. So this is early November. That's right. It was early November. So we were in Scorpio. It's probably like maybe the first week in November. I think it probably was a Sunday, too. I'm pretty sure it was a Sunday. So here we are. We're walking around London. It's Scorpio. And I see this seminar, whatever this thing is, for the power of death and transformation. I'm like, oh, well, that sounds interesting. So I eventually meet up with my fellow travelers, and we're having this dinner at this diner/cafe. I said, hey, this church, you know, it's a few blocks away. They're having this seminar on transformation. It's free. Maybe we should go. Like, really? I said, yeah. I know how to get there. Like, okay, all right, let's go. So we all pack up and shuffle down the street, around the corner, blah, blah, blah. I find the church, and, you know, the doors are open, and all these people are going into the main part of the church. I'm thinking, hey, man, this is going to be interesting, you know? And I look at all these people, and we've got, you know, we're Americans. We're not dressed incredibly well because we're traveling. You know, we've got our winter coats on and stuff, and some of us have backpacks, and, you know, it's, you know, you can tell that we're on the move. And we go into this church, and I sit down, and all of a sudden, this guy, and there was a woman. It was a woman. She got up in front of everybody at the church, and she started to talk. And she started to tell us about the life of this woman who was a social worker. And all of a sudden, I realized we're at somebody's eulogy. Like somebody had died. Like, we didn't even know this person, right? We just dropped in on their memorial. And people got up and they read, poems by John Donne. This one woman got up and she played Bach on her cello. And I'm thinking, this is just really the fucking worst form of spiritual tourism I've ever experienced in my life. I felt sick to my stomach. Right? Like, here I am. I'm looking for an experience. And what do I get? I get like somebody's life and death. I felt like such an interloper. People were looking at us, and they weren't being judgmental. They were just like shaking their heads like, yes, I know. We knew her as well. I'm sorry about, your relationship to her loss. I'm like, are you kidding me? It's like I couldn't wait to leave. So eventually, we waited for a soft spot in the memorial, and we all gracefully withdrew from the church. And I was like, all right, this is intense, right? So there's a reason why I'm telling you this story. And the reason is because later, a few years later, I had my astrocartography done, and I have Pluto running right through London. My Pluto in Virgo, near my midheaven, runs right through London. So it would make total sense that I would have a Pluto experience. And this was before I knew anything about astrocartography. And in fact, my knowledge of astrology was just starting to open up. I had a cursory knowledge of it. So when I backtracked later, this would have been 1989, so it would have been 5 years after that, I saw clearly that there was a link between Pluto in my chart, my astrocartographical chart, and also the city of London, the city-state of London. Okay, it's 10:36. You're listening to Navigating the Astrological Matrix. My name is Robert Phoenix. I'm your host. The call-in number, by the way, is 347-308-8995, 347-308-8995. I will be doing readings if you'd like to call in and have your chart looked at. We could specialize, again, and focus in on astrocartography. And if you want me to look at a city or two where you think you would be interested in moving to or living at, we've done this before in the past. And the reason I would do today is because Mercury in Sagittarius has gone direct, right? So if you're thinking about moving or relocating, we can fire your chart up, especially if there's nobody waiting. We can definitely get a couple of calls in and look at that more specifically. Mercury retrograde, I always enjoy watching Mercury retrograde get played out in sports. It's absolutely fascinating. Sports more than any other, although I have to say, this thing with John Corzine and MF Global got very interesting as well. He thought that he was going to get off scot-free. Doesn't appear to be that way now. We'll go back to Corzine in a little bit. But Mercury retrograde in sports is a fascinating subject, because if we look at Mercury, what does Mercury represent? It's movement. It's fast. It's quick. It's mercurial. It's speed is such an important aspect in sports. People that have well-aspected Mercuries can be very good at sports. My son, for instance, has Sun conjunct Mercury, which is he's got about a 3-degree orb on Sun conjunct Mercury. So he's got movement, life force, personality connected together. So it's actually it's a fortuitous, I think, connection. The conjunction's a little tight, but nonetheless. Anyway, so we see Mercury retrograde get played out in sport in a very fascinating kind of way. I'm sure many of the listeners don't follow this, but the NBA has its own team. It has a league, right? But it has its own team. The team is the New Orleans Hornets. And how they got that team is they bought the team from George Shinn, who used to be the president of Bank America. And that team used to be in Charlotte. That was the Charlotte Bobcats. And then they got moved to New Orleans. And then Charlotte got another team. It's convoluted. So Charlotte wound up getting, Charlotte's had two teams. And the New Orleans Hornets used to be the Charlotte Bobcats. You follow me? Okay. So anyway, the New Orleans Hornets were bought by the league from George Shinn. Every single owner, the team has 30 leagues, 29 owners chipped in, and they bought that team. So every owner has a piece of that team, right? So whatever that team does, if they make a profit, the owners get a small check. Theoretically, it's not a bad idea, but the problem is now is that you don't have somebody that's independent running that team. So you've got to think if you had a business, right, and you had a share in that business with 28 other people, and that business was, and then you had another business that you own pretty much outright, and the business that you own with 28 other people was competing against your own business. And somebody who's running that business that you have a stake in makes a deal with one of your competitors. And you think that the deal is not fair and that your competitor got an unfair advantage in the deal, thus creating a situation where your performance can be lessened. Less profit, less success. So in some ways, you're competing against yourself now. Now, this is what's happening with this team. And they tried to trade, they have a player, a star player, who doesn't want to play there anymore. He's in the last year of his contract. So David Stern told the guy who runs the New Orleans Hornets, Dell Demps, go make a deal. Trade this guy. He doesn't want to be there. His name's Chris Paul. Chris Paul's a Taurus, by the way. Jupiter's in Taurus retrograde. So he goes and he makes a 3-team deal. And he trades Chris Paul to the Los Angeles Lakers. And in return, the Hornets get 3 players, all of which are pretty good players, to be quite honest with you. I mean, they were getting Lamar Odom and Luis Scola and Kevin Martin. Those are not bad players. And L.A. lost a lot of players out of that deal. Now, what happened was is all of a sudden, the 28 other owners, the 29 owners, some of them screamed and yelled at Stern, and they said, no, this is an unfair advantage for Los Angeles. You're favoring a big market team. And they just came out of the collective bargaining agreement to try to level the playing field a little bit and get their budgets back in order. And here they are. They're just, so the deal gets nullified. Stern kills the deal. Classic Mercury retrograde. Then they try to do it to another team, and that doesn't work. And this thing is tortured, absolutely tortured. So we have Mercury retrograde clearly at work in the realm of sports. And it's happened quite frequently over the past 3.5 weeks where just, crazy stuff has happened. Ryan Braun. Here's another classic example of Mercury retrograde. Ryan Braun plays for the Milwaukee Brewers, and he won the National League MVP. And apparently, he tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs, also known as PEDs. And he knew when he won the MVP, he knew that he'd been positive. He tested positive, and he was thrilled. He was excited. And the guy is like glowing over the fact that, he won the award, even though it's not going to get taken away from him, but he will be suspended for 50 games. That's another Mercury retrograde kind of moment. All right, it is, 10:45. And I tell you what, if I don't get any phone calls and people chiming in wanting readings after the top of the hour, I'm going to shut it down today because I've got a ton of stuff to do. I'm on deadline with a bunch of things. If you want to find out more about what I do, you can go to robertphoenix.com, which is my website. You can go to the YouTube channel where these shows get put up.